I think unlike you discuss of animal or wildlife in particular, in other disciplines, talking these elements in law is very difficult. Also, that puts you into a lot of concern that where the discussion will lead to, that because the law itself, the international law particularly, itself evolving. So in a law, it evolves, daily. It also has a difficulty in positioning animals. So what is the role of an animal, and what is the role of an animal's privileges or rights or whatever, its welfare, conservation? How are we going to look that in particular by the lawmaking treaty bodies or lawmakers in the international platform? Now, one thing, when I wanted to write something particularly focusing on this wildlife and human conflict about Sri Lanka, I understood that there is a plenty of articles that are on what is the national law and what that speaks of that. What is the responsibility of our state in the national context, and where we have led to and what we have contributed to. But there comes a gap that the responsibility doesn't only imposed through the national context but also from the international context, where the countries like Sri Lanka, particularly the developing country, which as you said, another evolving terminology is the global south. So the global north and global south, it's something that we see internationally by the facilities that we have and the geopolitics and whatever the political ideologies that we carry, that we have confine ourselves into the global south. But I believe the global south identity should not be an excuse to not to fulfill our responsibility in international arena. There's one thing, it's true that when come to wildlife and human conflict, there are a lot of treaties. The significant treaties Sri Lanka has signed, ratified, and we don't know the difference between sign and ratified. When simply you sign, it just sign, but you ratify, you have an obligation to domesticate them into your own context. So a government or a regime which is coming to positions by every 5 years, it doesn't only have obligation to protect the wildlife, not because of the domestic laws but also because of the international obligations. We know how the regime or state takes up the international obligations, even for the rights of human. So there is no talk of rights of animals. So there is a lot of politics even in international level. This positioning animal is not per se protecting the animals, not giving them their rights, not providing the welfare of the animals, but the conservation of animal. That says the sustainability of the human beings, the existence of the human beings. That's just because of we have to live, we have to conserve them. So that is the idea. This entire law works on an international level. So that is why we see this ecocentrism and anthropocentrism, how those all works. I think this entire environment thing is being, looked into the lens of human beings, not, into the lens of protecting the animals or, even balancing the animals and the human elements. So with these things, we can see in international level, there is a bit of at least an attempt to conserve this wildlife, not to protect or give them any rights, but that I think we have to take up to the larger level, because now when we position the animals in the international level, we have armed conflict, we have trade, we have investment, we have environment. There is this global warming or this climate change. Every day we see everything is evolving. So animal also part of that, and our coexistence. There's a chain. I think we all have to be very vigilant of that chain. Because human and animals are into this chain, and if they are not sustainably used or if they are not wisely used, then the chain will be collapsed. I'm not in favor of this chain per se. I take the ecocentrism, but I'm telling, when you make the law, when you implement the law, this is how it works in international level, because it's very largely difficult to change its tone to the present context. So in this context, if you take Sri Lanka is really, if you see the previous regimes, they have signed every treaty. I don't know with the knowledge or without the knowledge, they don't even reserve some of the provisions if they don't have financial not inability to implement them. But they have signed everything, but they have not implemented them. So implementation, when you don't do what you have to do, if something occurs. For example, he explained about this Mahaveli project. When such a big project occurred, after its implementation, there comes this big loss for biodiversity or farmers or even, the entire situation. So there we only have a little to play. As a global south country, developing country, then we have to put up with the consequences. But beforehand, we have a role to play, that is the precaution. So that is what I have highlighted in the article, that countries like Sri Lanka, we only can do precaution. Before that, now for example, like environment impact assessment, that is the only thing that we have in our hand with the little capacity that we have. But that is not really intended to implemented by the state, not because of the financial inability or the other technological barriers, but politics. It is the political barrier. Because of the previous regimes, they didn't want to do, or the culture of the politics, or the corruption, whatever they are in the state, this is the barrier that in our country. So if you overcome this, you can to a larger extent implement the precaution. The precaution itself will control the damage. So I think this has to look into a lot of facets. One, Sri Lanka should adhere to the responsibility, obligation. At the same time, the international law is also not in favor of animals, but at least this wildlife conservation is there. So I just positions everything, and whatever the positive light we can get, within that I wrote this piece. I think there is a lot of things that we have to work on in future, that pursuing animals' rights or their welfare in a large extent in law, I am telling, because in other sociological elements or other elements, they have a lot of literature, lot of activism, but in law, I think we are still lacking behind. We have to put the lens of ecocentrism into the work, like, how we have done to the gender, how we have brought and enlightened the gender, we have to do that. So this is just a, embarking situation. We have a lot to revise. I think why there is this one reason I wanted to write about this state responsibility. Unlike these other regimes that we lived in or we have read of in the documentaries or histories, this particular regime is which talked of environment, it is political manifesto. It also had its separate environmental policy. In addition to that, now in other countries they have green party in politics, they have green politics. We don't have, but we have people, those who wrote about it, those who talked about it in this current politics. So I believe that those talk should be in vogue, not only in papers, black and white. So with those expectations, what we started encountering from the December, whatever the minister's statement to retaliate against the farmers as their, right to attack the crop raiding animals. So these are now, we wrote this article in January. By now there are a lot of developments had been happened, negative developments I would say for environment. So as a person teaching or working on environment, who has an empathy on environment, I don't think we are looking forward to a good positive sign. I don't think this can come on a record. I don't mind of it. So in such situation, I think the government should be mindful of its responsibility to at least protect the wildlife conservation, balancing the human rights, farmers' rights, whatsoever. The coexistence is the best way out. Now, for example, I will only point out this and end my talk. We can't tell that Sri Lanka is a developed country. We have barriers. Now, countries like India, if you take them, they also have a similar geopolitical situation like us. Now, recently, last 1 month, they started a work in Tamil Nadu and Kerala, where they have this wildlife-human conflict in the forest or in the areas where this wildlife is living. They don't have enough resources now. So the biggest challenge in the present context, the cause of this problem is the resource problem. So we both share the same resources because of we didn't take any precaution. So how to solve it, that is, we provide them the food and the water. So they try to now create the resources for them, so that they have a way of living in their own territory, so we can have our own existence. So this is the coexistence part they are trying to take off. I think these are the examples that as a country we have to take off, not to give right to farmers or people that you can attack the animal who is coming and raiding your crops. So I think this is something I'm shedding into the article. I thought this is this should be a read of introduction to international law to the common readers. So this is a very brief line. But if you are criticizing international law and what is the position of animal, there is a lot more to talk of. I think we can do that in future.